A black CEO faced shocking racism on a flight, sparking a revolutionary transformation. Hit subscribe now to watch this incredible story of courage, change, and redemption unfold right before your eyes. Don't forget to drop a comment telling us what time it is and where you're watching from. We'd love to know where our viewers are tuning in from all around the world. Letitia Williams gazed out the airplane window, her reflection a stark contrast to the sea of white faces surrounding her in first class. As the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, she was used to being the only black woman in rooms full of powerful people. But today, on this flight from New York to Los Angeles, she felt particularly alone. The flight attendant, a blonde woman named Olivia, had been eyeing Letitia suspiciously since she boarded. Letitia tried to shake off the familiar feeling of being judged, of having to prove she belonged. She straightened her designer suit and took a deep breath, reminding herself of the multi-billion-dollar deal she had just closed. "Excuse me," Letitia said politely as Olivia passed by. "Could I get a glass of water? Please." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "I'll be with you in a moment," she replied curtly, continuing down the aisle to serve a white passenger who had boarded after Letitia. Letitia's jaw clenched, but she remained calm. She'd dealt with this kind of treatment before. As she waited, she pulled out her phone, scrolling through emails. One caught her eye, a notification that her recent acquisition of this very airline had been finalized. A small smile played at her lips. No one on this plane, least of all Olivia, had any idea who she really was. Minutes passed, and still no water. Letitia raised her hand again as Olivia walked by. "Excuse me, I'm still waiting for that water." Olivia spun around, her face flushed with irritation. "Look, I told you I'd get to you. Why don't you people ever listen?" The cabin fell silent. Letitia's heart raced, but her voice remained steady. "I'm sorry. What do you mean by what you people?" Instead of answering, Olivia's hand shot out, striking Letitia across the face. The slap echoed through the cabin, leaving a stinging red mark on Letitia's cheek. Gasps erupted from nearby passengers. Letitia sat in stunned silence, her mind reeling. In all her years of facing discrimination, she'd never experienced such blatant, physical racism. As Olivia stormed off, muttering under her breath, Letitia's phone buzzed. Another email. The board was requesting an emergency meeting to discuss the airline's future. In that moment, Letitia made a decision that would change not only her life, but the lives of countless others. She wouldn't seek revenge. She wouldn't demand Olivia's termination. Instead, she would use this moment as a catalyst for change. With her newly acquired power as the airline's owner, she had the opportunity to transform its culture from the inside out. Letitia took a deep breath, her mind already formulating a plan. She would implement a comprehensive diversity awareness program, starting with Olivia as the focal point. It wouldn't be easy. Resistance was inevitable. But Letitia was no stranger to challenges. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, Letitia touched her cheek, still tender from the slap. She thought about all the people who had faced similar treatment but lacked the power to fight back. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about creating a ripple effect of change that could transform an entire industry. The seatbelt sign dinged, and passengers began to stir. Letitia remained seated, her posture regal, her expression determined. She watched as Olivia moved through the cabin, avoiding eye contact. Just before the doors opened, Letitia stood and approached Olivia. The flight attendant flinched, expecting a confrontation. "I hope you have a good day," Letitia said softly. "And I hope that one day you'll understand the impact of your actions." Olivia's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in confusion. Before she could respond, Letitia exited the plane, leaving a bewildered Olivia in her wake. As Letitia strode through the airport, Her phone buzzed with messages from her team. They were eager to begin implementing changes at the airline. Letitia smiled to herself. The next few months would be challenging, but she was ready. She paused at the airport exit, looking back at the gate she'd just left. In her mind, she could still see Olivia's face, angry, prejudiced, but also scared. Letitia knew that fear often bred hatred, and hatred bred violence. But she also knew that education and compassion could break that cycle. With renewed determination, Letitia stepped out into the California sunshine. She had work to do, and it started now. As she reached for the handle of her waiting car, a voice called out behind her. "Ms. Williams!" Letitia turned to see a young black woman rushing towards her, breathless and wide-eyed. "I saw what happened on the plane," the woman said. "I can't believe you didn't—" Letitia held up a hand, gently interrupting the young woman. "What's your name?" "Aisha," the woman replied, still catching her breath. "Aisha Johnson. I'm a flight attendant for the airline." Letitia smiled warmly. "It's nice to meet you, Aisha. Walk with me." As they moved towards the parking lot, Aisha spoke in hushed tones. "Ms. Williams, what Olivia did was inexcusable. I've worked with her before, and she's always been difficult, but this, you have to report her." Letitia stopped, turning to face Aisha. "Tell me, Aisha, have you ever experienced discrimination on the job?" Aisha's eyes dropped to the ground. "More times than I can count," she admitted softly. "And how did the company handle it when you reported it?" A bitter laugh escaped Aisha's lips. "Handle it? They told me I was being too sensitive, or that I must have misunderstood the situation." Letitia nodded, unsurprised. "That's exactly why simply reporting Olivia isn't enough. We need to change the entire system." Aisha's brow furrowed. "We? But how?" "I own the airline now, Aisha," Letitia said quietly, "and I'm going to need allies like you to help me transform it." Aisha's jaw dropped. You own... Oh my God. Letitia chuckled. "Keep that information to yourself for now, but I want you to be part of what comes next. Are you in?" Without hesitation, Aisha nodded. "Absolutely. What's the plan?" Over the next few weeks, Letitia worked tirelessly to implement her vision. She assembled a diverse team of experts in corporate culture, racial equity, and conflict resolution. Together, they crafted a comprehensive program designed to address not just overt racism, but also the subtle microaggressions that pervaded the company. Olivia, unaware of Letitia's true identity, was required to attend the first wave of training sessions. She arrived with arms crossed and jaw set, clearly resentful of being singled out. As Letitia stood at the front of the conference room, preparing to address the group, she could feel Olivia's glare burning into her. Taking a deep breath, she began, "Good morning, everyone. I'm Letitia Williams, and I'm here to talk about an incident that occurred on one of our flights recently." Olivia's face paled as recognition dawned. Letitia continued, her voice steady and compassionate. "What happened on that flight was unacceptable, but it's also symptomatic of deeper issues within our company and our society. Today, we begin the process of addressing those issues head-on." Over the next several hours, Letitia led the group through a series of exercises and discussions designed to unpack unconscious biases and confront uncomfortable truths. Olivia, initially resistant, found herself reluctantly engaged as the day wore on. During a break, Olivia approached Letitia, her body language a mix of defiance and uncertainty. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why not just fire me and be done with it?" Letitia met Olivia's gaze steadily. "Because firing you wouldn't solve the real problem. It wouldn't prevent the next Olivia from doing the same thing. We need to dig deeper. to understand why these incidents happen and how we can prevent them. Olivia's eyes welled with tears. I never thought of myself as racist. I have black friends. Having black friends doesn't make you immune to bias, Letitia said gently. None of us are. The key is recognizing our biases and actively working to overcome them. As the weeks passed, Olivia's transformation became a symbol of the broader changes taking place within the airline. She threw herself into the training, confronting her own prejudices with a determination that surprised even Letitia. One day, as Letitia was leaving her office, she overheard Olivia speaking to a group of her fellow flight attendants. "I know some of you think this diversity stuff is just corporate BS," Olivia was saying. "I thought so too, at first. But guys, we have to do better. We have to be better." What happened with Miss Williams? It opened my eyes to how much harm we can do without even realizing it. Letitia smiled to herself, feeling a glimmer of hope. Change was happening, slowly but surely. But not everyone was on board with Letitia's vision. As word of the airline's new initiative spread, a vocal minority of shareholders began to express concern. They worried about the cost of the programs and the potential for negative publicity. Letitia stood firm in the face of their criticism. She organized a forum where passengers could share their experiences of discrimination, inviting shareholders and executives to attend. The stories shared that day were powerful and heartbreaking. Passengers of color recounted incidents of being profiled, harassed, and made to feel unwelcome. LGBTQ+ travelers spoke of feeling unsafe and marginalized. As the final speaker concluded, Letitia took the stage. The room was hushed, many attendees visibly shaken by what they'd heard. "This," Letitia said, her voice ringing out clear and strong, "is why we're doing what we're doing. This is why we can't afford to maintain the status quo. Our passengers deserve better. Our employees deserve better. We all deserve better." She paused, scanning the room. Her eyes landed on Olivia, who sat near the front, tears streaming down her face. "Change isn't easy," Letitia continued. "It's uncomfortable, it's messy, but it's necessary. And I believe that by facing these issues head-on, by committing ourselves to real, lasting change, we can become not just a better airline, but a model for the entire industry." As Letitia concluded her speech, the room erupted in applause. Even some of the skeptical shareholders seemed moved, but Letitia knew the real work was just beginning. As she stepped off the stage, she caught Olivia's eye. The flight attendant nodded, a look of fierce determination on her face. Together, they were about to embark on the most challenging flight of their lives, a journey toward true equality and justice, and this time, they were both committed to ensuring a smooth landing. As the applause died down, Letitia made her way through the crowd, shaking hands and fielding questions. She couldn't help but notice the mix of emotions on people's faces: hope, uncertainty, and in some cases, lingering skepticism. Just as she was about to exit the auditorium, a hand caught her elbow. Letitia turned to find herself face to face with Marcus Whitfield, one of the airline's most influential board members. "Ms. Williams," he said, his voice low and controlled. "A word at her, please." Letitia nodded, following Marcus to a quiet corner. She braced herself for another confrontation about the cost and potential risks of her diversity initiatives. "That was quite something," Marcus began, his expression unreadable. "I'll admit, I had my doubts about this whole program. Thought it might be more trouble than it's worth." Letitia opened her mouth to defend her position, but Marcus held up a hand. "Let me finish," he said. "My granddaughter, she's biracial. Her mother, my daughter, is white, and her father is black. Last month, they were flying our airline, and..." He paused, swallowing hard. "Well, let's just say their experience wasn't what it should have been. Letitia's heart sank. "I'm so sorry to hear that, Marcus. What happened?" Marcus shook his head. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is that I see now why this is so important. I was blind to it before. But hearing those stories today, I get it now. And I want you to know you have my full support moving forward." Letitia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Having Marcus on her side would make a world of difference in the boardroom. "Thank you, Marcus," she said sincerely. "Your support means more than you know." As they parted ways, Letitia caught sight of Olivia standing nearby. Clearly having overheard the conversation, the flight attendant's face was a mix of shame and determination. "Miss Collins-Williams," Olivia said, approaching hesitantly. I want to help, really help. I mean, not just go through the motions. What can I do?" Letitia studied Olivia for a moment, considering. "Are you sure?" "This won't be easy. You'll face pushback, maybe even hostility from some of your colleagues." Olivia nodded firmly. "I'm sure. I need to make this right." A plan began to form in Letitia's mind. "All right," she said. "I have an idea, but it's going to take courage. Are you ready for that?" Over the next few months, Letitia's vision for the airline began to take shape. With Olivia as an unexpected ally, they implemented a series of changes that rippled through every level of the company. Olivia, true to her word, threw herself into the work. She became a vocal advocate for the diversity initiatives, sharing her own story of transformation with anyone who would listen. It wasn't always easy. Some of her fellow flight attendants accused her of selling out or trying to curry favor with management. But Olivia persevered, her determination growing with each small victory. One particularly challenging day, Olivia found herself facing a group of skeptical pilots during a training session. As she explained the importance of recognizing and addressing microaggressions, she could feel the resistance in the room. "Look," one pilot said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "We're here to fly planes, not hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Why are we wasting time on this feel-good nonsense?" Olivia took a deep breath, remembering Letitia's words about courage. "I used to think like you," she admitted. "I thought I wasn't part of the problem. But then I did something unforgivable." She recounted the incident with Letitia, not sparing herself any of the uncomfortable details. As she spoke, she could see the pilots' expressions changing, moving from skepticism to shock, and then, slowly, to understanding. "I'm not proud of what I did," Olivia concluded, "but I'm grateful for the chance to make it right, and that's what this is all about, recognizing our mistakes, learning from them, and doing better." The room was silent for a moment. Then, one by one, the pilots began to engage, asking questions and sharing their own experiences. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Letitia was fighting her own battles in the corporate offices. Despite Marcus's support, there were still board members and executives who pushed back against her initiatives, arguing that they were too costly or too risky. During one particularly heated board meeting, Letitia found herself on the defensive once again. "Ms. Williams," drawled Richard Hartley, a longtime board member known for his conservative views. "While your intentions are admirable, we have to consider the bottom line. These programs are expensive, and frankly, I'm not convinced they're necessary. Our airline has always been committed to equal treatment." Letitia leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Mr. Hartley, I appreciate your concern for our financial health, but I would argue that we can't afford not to make these changes. Let me show you something." She pulled up a series of charts on the screen behind her, displaying customer satisfaction ratings, employee retention rates, and revenue projections. "Since implementing our diversity initiatives," Letitia explained, "we've seen a 15% increase in customer satisfaction among passengers of color. Our employee retention rates have improved by 22%. saving us millions in turnover costs. And our brand reputation scores are at an all-time high, which is translating into increased bookings. The room fell silent as the board members absorbed the information. Even Richard looked thoughtful. Furthermore, Letitia continued, we're not just doing this because it's good for business, though clearly it is. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do, because every person who steps onto one of our planes deserves to feel safe, respected, and valued. As the meeting adjourned, Letitia could feel the shift in the room. She had won over some of the skeptics, at least for now, but she knew the work was far from over. Later that evening, as Letitia was preparing to leave her office, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Aisha, the young flight attendant she had met outside the airport months ago. Ms. Yenji Williams, Aisha said, her eyes shining with excitement. I just had to come and tell you. I was on a flight today, and there was an incident. A passenger was being, racist towards one of our crew members. Letitia's heart sank. I'm so sorry to hear that, Aisha. What happened? Aisha grinned. That's just it. Before anyone else could react, Olivia stepped in. She handled it beautifully. Ms. Williams. She de-escalated the situation, educated the passenger without being confrontational, and made sure our crew member felt supported. It was like watching everything you've been teaching us in action. Letitia felt a wave of emotion wash over her. It was moments like these that made all the struggles worthwhile. Thank you for sharing that, Aisha, Letitia said warmly. It's important to celebrate these victories, no matter how small they might seem. As Aisha left, Letitia turned to look out her office window at the bustling airport below. She thought about how far they'd come, and how far they still had to go. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with allies like Olivia and Aisha, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did she know, the biggest test of her leadership, and of the airline's newfound commitment to equality, was just around the corner. As dawn broke over the city, Letitia's phone buzzed with an urgent message. A crisis was unfolding at one of the airline's major hubs, and it threatened to undo months of hard work and progress. Letitia rushed to the airport, her mind racing. When she arrived, she found the terminal in chaos. A group of passengers was staging a sit-in, blocking access to several gates. Social media was ablaze with accusations of racial profiling and discrimination. What happened? Letitia demanded, pulling aside Marcus, who had arrived just before her. Marcus's face was grim. It's bad, Letitia. A black family, was removed from one of our flights last night. The official report says they were being disruptive, but eyewitness accounts tell a different story. Letitia's heart sank. This was exactly the kind of incident they'd been working so hard to prevent. Where are they now? The family? Still here, Marcus replied. They refused to leave until they spoke with someone in charge. Letitia nodded, straightening her jacket. All right, I'm going to talk to them. In the meantime, I need you to gather our crisis management team. And Marcus, make sure Olivia's there. As Letitia made her way through the crowded terminal, she could feel the tension in the air. Angry voices rose above the usual din of airport noise. She spotted the family, a couple with 2 young children, surrounded by a group of supporters. Taking a deep breath, Letitia approached them. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, she said, addressing the couple. I'm Letitia Williams, CEO of the airline. I understand you've had a terrible experience, and I'm here to listen. The woman, her eyes red from crying, looked at Letitia with a mix of surprise and suspicion. You're the CEO? And you're actually here. Letitia nodded. I am, and I want to hear exactly what happened, in your own words. Over the next hour, Letitia listened as the family recounted their ordeal. They described how a minor disagreement over a seating arrangement had escalated, with the flight crew accusing them of being aggressive. Despite their attempts to remain calm, they were ultimately removed from the flight. As the story unfolded, Letitia felt a familiar mix of anger and disappointment. Despite all their efforts, they still had a long way to go. "I am deeply sorry for what you've experienced," Letitia said when they finished. "This is not the airline we're striving to be. I promise you, we will investigate this thoroughly, and there will be consequences." Mr. Johnson leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "With all due respect, Ms. Williams, we've heard promises before. What makes you any different?" It was a fair question, and one Letitia had anticipated. "Because I've been where you are," she said quietly. "I've experienced discrimination on our flights. In fact, it was an incident very similar to yours that led me to buy this airline and commit to changing its culture from the ground up." The family exchanged surprised glances. Letitia continued, "I know words aren't enough, so I'm asking you to work with us. Help us make sure this never happens to another family. Will you consider being part of our Passenger Advisory Board on Diversity and Inclusion?" For the first time since the conversation began, Mrs. Johnson's expression softened. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" Letitia nodded firmly. "More serious than I've ever been about anything." As they continued to talk, the tension in the terminal began to ease. Word spread that the CEO herself was addressing the situation, and the protesters gradually dispersed. By the time Letitia made her way back to the conference room where her team was gathered, she had a plan forming in her mind. She entered the room to find a mix of anxious and determined faces, including Olivia's. "All right, team," Letitia began, her voice steady and confident. "We have a situation, but we also have an opportunity. Here's what we're going to do." Over the next several hours, Letitia and her team worked tirelessly to craft a response that would not only address the immediate crisis, but also reinforce their commitment to systemic change. They issued a public apology, not just to the Johnson family, but to all passengers who had ever experienced discrimination on their flights. They announced the creation of a Passenger Advisory Board on Diversity and Inclusion, with the Johnsons as founding members. And they committed to an independent audit of their policies and procedures, with the results to be made public. But Letitia knew that public statements weren't enough. Real change had to happen on the ground, in the day-to-day interactions between staff and passengers. That's where Olivia came in. "Olivia," Letitia said, pulling her aside as the meeting wrapped up. "I have a special assignment for you. I want you to lead a task force to revamp our training programs, not just for flight attendants, but for every employee who interacts with passengers. Can you do that?" Olivia's eyes widened. "Me? But after everything I've done," Letitia placed a hand on Olivia's shoulder. "Because of everything you've done. Your journey is powerful, Olivia. It shows that real change is possible, and that's exactly the message we need right now." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but she nodded resolutely. "I won't let you down, Ms. Carver-Williams." As the crisis response plan rolled out over the following weeks, Letitia found herself in the media spotlight. She gave interviews, appeared on talk shows, and wrote op-eds explaining the airline's commitment to change. Not all the coverage was positive. There were critics who accused the airline of virtue signaling, of caving to pressure. But Letitia stood firm, using each opportunity to reinforce their message of genuine, lasting change. One particularly tense moment came during a live television interview. The host, known for his aggressive questioning style, tried to corner Letitia. "Miss Williams," he said, his tone confrontational, "some would say that by focusing so much on these diversity initiatives, you're actually creating more division, that you're seeing racism where it doesn't exist. How do you respond to that?" Letitia met his gaze steadily. I would say that ignoring a problem doesn't make it go away. We're not creating division. We're acknowledging a division that already exists and working to bridge it. And as for seeing racism where it doesn't exist," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "I wish that were true. But the experiences of passengers like the Johnson family, of employees who face discrimination, and yes, my own experiences, tell a different story." The host pressed on. "But surely you can't deny that some people might take advantage of this crying racism when they're simply not getting their way?" "Of course that's a possibility," Letitia conceded. "But I'd argue that the harm done by occasionally giving someone the benefit of the doubt is far less than the harm done by systemic discrimination. We're not just reacting to individual incidents. We're working to create a culture where everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of their race, gender, or background." As the interview concluded, Letitia's phone buzzed with messages of support from her team, but one message in particular caught her eye. It was from Olivia. "Just watched your interview. You were amazing. I'm proud to be part of this team." Letitia smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. They had a long road ahead, but with allies like Olivia, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As she left the television studio, Letitia's mind was already racing with ideas for their next steps. The crisis had been a setback, but it had also galvanized their efforts. Now, more than ever, she was determined to make their airline a model of inclusivity and respect. Little did she know, the biggest test of her leadership and of the airline's newfound commitment to equality was yet to come. As the dust settled from the crisis, Letitia found herself facing a new challenge. The airline's board of directors had called an emergency meeting, and the atmosphere in the boardroom was tense as Letitia took her seat at the head of the table. Richard Hartley, the conservative board member who had been skeptical of Letitia's initiatives from the start, was the first to speak. "Ms. Williams," he began, his voice tight with barely contained anger, "while we appreciate your efforts to address the recent incident, we have serious concerns about the direction you're taking this company." Letitia steeled herself, knowing this confrontation had been brewing for months. "I'm listening, Mr. Hartley. What exactly are your concerns?" Richard leaned forward, his jaw set. "Frankly, we believe you've lost sight of our primary goal, to run a profitable airline. These diversity programs are costing us millions, and now we're facing potential lawsuits and negative publicity. It's time to cut our losses and return to focusing on what we do best, flying planes." A murmur of agreement rippled through some of the board members. Letitia felt a familiar tightening in her chest, the weight of being the only Black woman in a room full of powerful white men. But she'd been here before, and she was prepared. "I understand your concerns," Letitia began, her voice calm but firm. "But I respectfully disagree with your assessment. May I present some data?" Without waiting for a response, Letitia stood and walked to the screen at the front of the room. With a few taps on her tablet, she brought up a series of charts and graphs. "Since implementing our diversity and inclusion initiatives," she explained, "we've seen a 20% increase in customer satisfaction scores across all demographics. Our employee retention rate has improved by 25%, saving us millions in turnover costs. And despite the recent setback, our brand reputation scores have actually improved by 15% in the past month alone." She turned to face the board, her gaze steady. "Gentlemen, I'm not losing sight of our goal to run a profitable airline. I'm showing you how we can be both profitable and socially responsible. In fact, I'd argue that in today's world, we can't have one without the other." Richard scoffed. "Pretty charts don't change the fact that we're hemorrhaging money on these programs. And what about the potential lawsuits?" Letitia nodded, acknowledging his point. "You're right. The programs do have a cost. But let me show you something else." She swiped to a new slide, showing projected revenue growth. Based on our current trajectory, we're on track to increase our market share by 5% in the next quarter alone. That translates to an additional $100 million in revenue. The room fell silent as the board members absorbed this information. Letitia continued, "As for the lawsuits, our legal team assures me that our proactive approach and commitment to change actually strengthens our position. We're not denying that problems existed. We're showing that we're actively working to solve them." Marcus, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "I have to say, I was skeptical at first, but I've seen the changes firsthand. The morale among our employees is higher than I've ever seen it, and passengers are noticing too." Letitia felt a surge of gratitude for Marcus's support, but Richard wasn't backing down. "This is all well and good," he said, "but what happens when the next crisis hits? We can't afford to be constantly putting out fires." Letitia smiled, having anticipated this question. "That's exactly why these programs are so important, Mr. Hartley. We're not just reacting to crises, we're working to prevent them. By creating a culture of inclusivity and respect, we're reducing the likelihood of these incidents occurring in the first place." She paused, looking around the room. "Gentlemen, I know change is uncomfortable, but the world is changing, with or without us. We have the opportunity to be leaders in our industry, to show that it's possible to be both profitable and socially responsible. I'm asking you to trust me, to give these initiatives the time they need to fully bear fruit." The room was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, heads began to nod. Even Richard, though still frowning, seemed less combative. "All right, Ms. Williams," he said grudgingly. "You've made your case. We'll continue with the programs, for now, but we'll be watching the numbers closely." Letitia nodded, feeling a mix of relief and determination. "Thank you for your trust. I assure you, you won't be disappointed." As the meeting adjourned, Letitia felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Marcus. "That was impressive," he said quietly. "You've got more support in that room than you might think. Keep doing what you're doing." Letitia smiled, grateful for the encouragement. As she left the boardroom, her phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. "Task force assembled and ready to go. When can we meet to discuss next steps?" Energized by her victory in the boardroom, Letitia quickly replied, setting up a meeting for the following morning. She had a feeling that Olivia and her team would play a crucial role in the next phase of their transformation. The next day, Letitia arrived at the conference room to find Olivia and a diverse group of employees waiting for her. The energy in the room was palpable, a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. "Good morning, everyone," Letitia began, smiling warmly. "Thank you all for being here. Olivia, why don't you start by introducing the team?" Olivia stood, her posture confident but her voice tinged with emotion. "Ms. Williams, I'm honored to present our Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. We have representatives from every department: flight operations, customer service, HR, marketing, even a few of our frequent flyers who volunteered to offer the passenger perspective." Letitia nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Diverse perspectives are exactly what we need. Now, let's talk about our next steps." Over the next 2 hours, the room buzzed with ideas and discussions. They talked about revamping training programs, creating mentorship opportunities for employees from underrepresented groups, and implementing a system for passengers to provide real-time feedback on their experiences. As the meeting drew to a close, Letitia felt a sense of excitement she hadn't experienced in a long time. This was why she had bought the airline, not just to fix problems, but to create a new standard for the industry. "Before we wrap up," Letitia said, "I want to share something with all of you. Yesterday, I had to defend our initiatives to the board of directors. It wasn't easy, but do you know what made it possible? The hard work that each of you, and all of our employees, have been doing. The changes we're seeing, the improvements in our numbers, That's because of you." She paused, looking around the room. "What we're doing here isn't just about making our airline better. It's about showing the world that change is possible, that we can create workplaces and spaces where everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of their background." Olivia spoke up, her voice filled with determination. "Ms. Williams, I think I speak for all of us when I say we're ready for whatever comes next. We believe in this vision, and we're committed to making it a reality." As the team filed out of the room, energized and ready to tackle their new assignments, Letitia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more crises to navigate. But looking at the diverse, passionate group of individuals who had just left her office, she felt more confident than ever that they were on the right path. Little did she know, the biggest test of their newfound unity and commitment was just around the corner, a test that would push Letitia, Olivia, and the entire airline to their limits. As the weeks passed, Letitia's initiatives began to show tangible results. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, customer complaints had decreased significantly, and the airline was receiving positive press for its progressive stance on diversity and inclusion. Even Richard Hartley had begrudgingly admitted that the numbers were looking good. But just as things seemed to be settling into a new, positive rhythm, disaster struck. It was a routine flight from New York to Los Angeles, piloted by Captain James Anderson, one of the airline's most experienced pilots. Halfway through the flight, passengers reported hearing a heated argument coming from the cockpit. Moments later, the plane began to descend rapidly. Thanks to the quick thinking of the co-pilot and the flight attendants, a tragedy was averted. The plane made an emergency landing in Denver, with all passengers and crew safe. But as details of the incident emerged, Letitia realized they were facing a crisis that threatened to undo all their hard work. Captain Anderson, it turned out, had suffered a mental health episode mid-flight. In his disoriented state, he had attempted to crash the plane. The co-pilot, a young black woman named Tanya Roberts, had managed to subdue him and take control of the aircraft. As Letitia rushed to Denver to handle the situation, her phone was buzzing non-stop with calls from the media, the board, and concerned employees. She knew that how they handled this crisis would define the airline's future. Upon arriving at the Denver airport, Letitia was met by a grim-faced Olivia. "It's bad, Ms. Williams," Olivia said as they hurried through the terminal. "Social media is exploding. There are already calls for Captain Anderson to be fired, but also accusations that we're not doing enough to support pilots, mental health, and there's more." Letitia braced herself. "What is it?" Olivia hesitated before continuing. "There are rumors circulating that Captain Anderson had made racist comments about co-pilot Roberts in the past. Some are saying we ignored warning signs because he was a senior white male pilot." Letitia felt a headache coming on. This wasn't just a safety issue or a PR nightmare. It was a direct challenge to everything they'd been working towards. "Where are Captain Anderson and co-pilot Roberts now?" Letitia asked. "Captain Anderson is in custody. Co-pilot Roberts is being debriefed by our crisis team. She's shaken but holding up well," Olivia replied. Letitia nodded. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, I want to meet with co-pilot Roberts. Then, we need to gather all the facts about Captain Anderson's history with the airline. And Olivia, I want you to start putting together a team to review and overhaul our mental health support systems for all employees, especially those in high-stress positions like pilots." As they worked tirelessly over the next few days, Letitia was reminded of why she had chosen Olivia to lead the diversity task force. Olivia's organizational skills, empathy, and newfound commitment to equality were proving invaluable in navigating this complex situation. Letitia's meeting with co-pilot Roberts was emotional but enlightening. Tanya confirmed that she had experienced microaggressions from Captain Anderson in the past, but had hesitated to report them, fearing it would harm her career prospects in the male-dominated field of aviation. "I didn't want to be seen as the black woman who couldn't take a joke," Tanya admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now, I can't help but wonder if speaking up could have prevented this." Letitia reached out and squeezed Tanya's hand. "This is not your fault," she said firmly, "but your experience highlights exactly why the changes we're making are so important. No one should ever feel afraid to speak up about discrimination or concerns about a colleague's well-being." As more details came to light, it became clear that Captain Anderson had been struggling with undiagnosed depression for years. His racist comments, while inexcusable, were likely a symptom of his deteriorating mental state. Letitia knew they needed to address this crisis head-on, with transparency and compassion. She called for a press conference, with the full support of the board. Even Richard Hartley had recognized the need for decisive action. Standing before a sea of cameras and reporters, Letitia took a deep breath. "Good afternoon. As you all know, our airline experienced a serious incident 3 days ago. Thanks to the heroic actions of co-pilot Tanya Roberts and our dedicated flight crew, a tragedy was averted. All passengers and crew are safe." She paused, meeting the gaze of various reporters. But the fact that this incident occurred at all is unacceptable. It represents a failure on our part, a failure to adequately support the mental health of our employees, and a failure to create an environment where all staff feel safe reporting concerns about their colleagues. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Letitia continued, her voice steady. "Effective immediately, we are implementing the following changes. First, we are overhauling our mental health support systems. All employees will have access to confidential counseling services, and we will be implementing mandatory mental health check-ins for all staff in high-stress positions. Second, we are strengthening our reporting systems for any incidents of discrimination or concerning behavior. We want to create a culture where speaking up is not just accepted, but encouraged. Third, we will be expanding our diversity and inclusion training programs to include more focus on mental health awareness and support. Lastly, we will be creating an independent oversight committee to review all aspects of our operations, with a focus on safety, equality, and employee well-being." Letitia paused, looking directly into the main camera. "To our passengers, I want to say this. Your safety is, and always will be, our top priority. To our employees, know that we are committed to supporting you, all of you, in every aspect of your work and well-being. And to co-pilot Tanya Roberts and all the crew members on that flight, I want to express our deepest gratitude. Your courage and quick thinking saved lives. You represent the very best of what our airline stands for." As Letitia fielded questions from reporters, she felt a mix of exhaustion and determination. This crisis had tested them in ways she couldn't have imagined, but it had also reinforced the importance of the changes they were making. In the weeks that followed, the airline's response to the crisis was widely praised. Mental health advocates applauded their proactive approach, while diversity experts held up their transparency as a model for other companies to follow. Olivia's team worked tirelessly to implement the new mental health initiatives, collaborating closely with experts in the field. Tanya Roberts, after taking some time to recover, became a vocal advocate for both mental health awareness and diversity in aviation. Even Richard Hartley had come around. In a private meeting with Letitia, he admitted, "I didn't see it before, but now I understand. This isn't just about being politically correct. It's about creating a safer, more effective company. You were right, Ms. Holness-Williams." As the dust settled, Letitia found herself reflecting on the journey they'd been on. From that first confrontation with Olivia on the plane, to the challenges in the boardroom, to this latest crisis, each step had been difficult, but each had also moved them closer to becoming the airline she had envisioned. One afternoon, as Letitia was leaving her office, she ran into Olivia in the hallway. The woman who had once slapped her was now one of her most trusted allies. "Ms. Williams, Olivia said, a smile on her face. I just wanted to say thank you for not giving up on me, on this company, for showing us all what real leadership looks like. Letitia felt a lump form in her throat. Thank you, Olivia. But this isn't just my victory. It's ours. All of ours. As they walked together towards the exit, Letitia felt a sense of pride and hope. They had faced discrimination, resistance, and crisis, and had emerged stronger. There would be more challenges ahead, she knew. The work of creating true equality and inclusion was never done. But looking at Olivia, thinking of Tanya, of Marcus, of all the employees and passengers whose lives had been touched by their efforts, Letitia knew one thing for certain. They were on the right path. And together, they would continue to soar to new heights, creating an airline and a world where everyone could fly free from fear and prejudice. As they stepped out into the warm afternoon sun, Letitia smiled. The sky was clear, full of endless possibilities,